In a very odd way, this scene was the beginning of my journey. Drake's Beach, California. This is a place where you go to freeze your butt off and get hypothermia, but take some really great pictures of whales or sea life or something like that. And here, on this day, at 107 degrees, highest temperatures ever recorded. Next thing you know, the hurricanes start rolling in, having nothing, of course, to do with California. And my friend Gail down in Puerto Rico, and I was begging her to get out of the way. She turned out fine. But I realized I couldn't really sit on the couch any longer, and I had to do something. So, I joined the Red Cross and jumped on an airplane. Next thing I knew, I was headed for St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands. When we landed finally in St. Croix, I'd never seen so many military aircraft outside of a place where you would expect to see that, never at a private airport. It was kind of a wild sight. Watching these Osprey taking off and thinking, oh boy, what did I get myself into? One of the things that was really sort of neat for me was all the people, and this is of course just a very small amount, that were all coming to help out, and that was really uplifting. This is taking off from St. Croix and working our way to St. Thomas. Been a long trip at this point already, and we were just getting started. Flying into St. Thomas was, it's hard to explain. You looked out the window and you thought to yourself, well, geez, I mean, that doesn't really look that bad. So, there was some concern, geez, did I come all this way for a minor event? Then you realize as you'd look out the window and you'd look at the color, that's not the way it normally looks. It's normally lush and green, and you think, well, why is it so brown? And the force of the wind was so strong that it literally ripped all of the leaves off the trees. And slowly you started to realize, yeah, this was a pretty big problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're in St. Thomas. Just remain seated until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign. Guys, be safe out there, and we'll see you. Ladies and gentlemen, be safe out there, and we'll see you this evening.
Looking out, I had that same feeling. Well, it doesn't look that bad. And then you'd look closely and see an airplane in the ditch, or little pieces of aircraft strewn about like nothing. Looking at the airport, you realized why it had been closed. And driving away, you really got a sense of what was happening on the island. Pretty soon, you didn't have to look very close to realize this place has been shredded pretty good. Telephone poles thrown around like toothpicks. And a lot of houses were there and standing, and from a distance they'd look okay. The thing is they're mostly built of concrete. Anything that was stick framed was just completely destroyed. But a lot of the houses were built with concrete walls, but not really concrete roofs. And looking at Haven site, you see these structures that were made to withstand a hurricane that I'd never seen stucco ripped off the building. I mean, that's stucco that was blown off the building. Think about the kind of wind that it takes to do that. Absolutely surreal. Driving along the waterfront, looking at the destruction, but also trying to remember this place as I left it 30 years ago. When I was a kid, it was probably one of the best places I'd ever been. I just absolutely fell in love with it. So when I saw the hurricane coming for it, I knew I had to come and do what I could do to help out in some small way. One of the very odd feelings that I got is, looking out at the waterfront, you'd see one or two boats or something like that, but normally Charlotte Amalia is just loaded with boats everywhere. They're all anchored all over the place, and there's dinghies running back and forth and people running supplies out to their boats, and there's just a lot of commerce that happens on the water that you just didn't see. And I started getting into the neighborhoods, and we were doing what we call disaster analysis or disaster assessment. And this is how we determine what areas we need to bring supplies to. And it didn't take much of a study at that to realize that basically the whole island, nobody had any power, nobody had any water. Everybody had a leaking roof, except for a few very lucky houses. And it starts to set in, what kind of disaster this really was. And it was always really odd, like I said, you'd see a building with the walls up, but no roof on it. So looking at it from the right angle, you look right up through and see the roof. Or rather, not see the roof. You look through the walls and up through where the roof would be and see the sky. Pretty crazy. A lot of places were actually fine and, for the most part, but they couldn't get their car out because somebody's roof would have flown from God knows where, and you just couldn't get out of your house. There was a lot of that. Yeah, just when you thought you were catching a break, you get some torrential downpour. And if you did have any power, it was because you had a generator running. So we relied heavily on that. Looking out across the waterfront, looked like everything was pretty hunky-dory, but then you'd realize that there's some boat right up on the rocks, half sunk. This was a church that we drove by, and it became kind of locally famous damage because it was just so severe, and it was what looked like a really well-built building, but obviously couldn't have held up. A lot of cars strewn across the place, and then guess what? Here comes Maria. And just when you thought it was safe to visit the islands, my daughter had said to me, "Dad, I don't want you going down there." And I said, "Well, it's not like I'm going to get stuck in a hurricane or something. I mean, come on, I'm going down to help people." Well, so much for that theory. But, I figured they couldn't be evacuated, not the people on the island. And a lot of FEMA was pulling out. A lot of the military was pulling out. But what were we going to do? Leave them there and, with no help? So I decided that I, for one, was going to stay no matter what. Turns out a lot of other Red Crossers saw it exactly that way. And so we stuck around. And this was our staff shelter. We battened up the windows and did the best we could. And when the hurricane hit, I was looking around to look for damage. Of course, the darn thing happened to come at night. So we were out there with flashlights looking around. The next morning, and that was the thing, Maria just dumped a lot of rain on us. And the ground was already saturated, so, there's just no place for all that water to go. So hence the flooding. And on top of that, there's, not just flooding, but, all the houses there are pretty much on septic. So with the ground not being able to absorb those septic systems, you had E. coli bacteria, basically coming out of the ground everywhere. So the water wasn't really safe to drink, and we knew we had to be around and get water out to people. We didn't want them to start drinking the water from their cisterns. Definitely never did anything like this before. And watching the water going down the sidewalk like it was like a river. Just kind of surreal. We were pretty lucky where we were at. I remember at one point I had been up quite a bit during the night, and somebody woke me up and said, "Micah." I'm like, "What are you waking me up for?" He said, "Well, your cot is in about 6 inches of water." So, oh boy. And I can't imagine what some of these people were dealing with, they didn't have tarps on the roofs or no roofs. Can you imagine? And you're just sitting there. I mean, thank God it's not freezing cold, but, you just got, water dumping down on you. You got nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. So, in hindsight, I'd say we were pretty fortunate, really. We had a relatively decent place to hunker down. And the roads were trying to wash out. They didn't quite completely wash out. She didn't want to be driving around in some small car. Basement down below our shelter had a
Not a big fan of the cheese.
CrossFit gym in it, and we just decided to clean it out for him. And then the animals started showing up, and we started helping them out too. Finally, it was time to start getting some supplies out to people. Water, cleanup kits. It's really all we had to start with, but it was something. More and more animals just coming out from everywhere. There were iguanas all over the place. It seemed kind of sad that they were displaced. You realize that, we were kind of all in this together. No real discrimination between the animals and the islanders. The cats at the Humane Society, we went there to drop that dog off in the photo and bring the Humane Society some supplies, including a big thing of cat food. These guys were so cute. You could see that they just wanted to have somebody to hang out and love them. So a lot of us brought animals home or arranged to have them sent home. So try to help out as you could. This is my friend Mary. I was really impressed how local law enforcement always made sure that they could help out any way that they could. More supplies, get the supplies out, get them out as fast as possible. James and Kai were my great partners in crime, getting stuff out to St. John on the ferry. So everything we took had to go all the way from St. Thomas all the way to St. John, and it took nearly all day just to get a load out. More boats on the water. It was a lot of work. But you didn't complain about it. You just got out there and did what you could do. No matter what you were going through or how much sadness you saw, it was important to try to keep a good positive mental attitude. And the Islanders were always keeping a good upper lip, if you will, a good stiff upper lip, and they were happy and positive, and it was really kind of just mind-blowing. People that had just lost everything, and or the people around them, but they'd always smile at you. You always had to say good morning or good afternoon or good evening when you start any sentence, or they would be offended. And as long as you did that, it was all good. Everybody was really grateful that we were there to help. Driving by Red Hook, I grew up on boats, and you always would, if you had a hurricane coming, you'd definitely haul your boat, get it up out of the water where it's safe. It didn't work out too well for these guys. Some pretty nice boats in there too. They all just got blown over, but you can't really battle with 250 mile an hour winds. Never seen anything like this. Okay, so I'm in a a borrowed flatbed with six pallets of water and cleanup kits heading for St. John. On one of the local, they call them car barges. And this thing, I'm very grateful to have been able to borrow this vehicle to get supplies over there. It really makes things a lot better for us, but the clutch is almost completely gone on this thing. And the shift pattern's really tight, so a little bit of a stressor getting out here this morning. But you know what, we're on the way to St. John, and we're going to help people, and it's a beautiful day. What better way could there possibly be to spend your time? Anyway, just reflecting. Days we've been carrying in supplies on this truck. What happens is we get them here, and we've managed to get a container where we can keep them in. And now that we have enough of these bulk supplies here, what we're going to start doing is taking them out in small vehicles like Jeeps, which it's kind of what you need here because of the condition of the roads. But we're going to carry them out and go house to house and deliver cleanup kits and water, and make sure everybody's got something to work with. So that's the job. It's good stuff. Nothing like 2 hurricanes and then some torrential downpour to make life more interesting.
It's only a couple hours of downpour.
You hear talk about how, the VI, they didn't get hit all that bad. Things are returning to normal. Things are looking pretty good. I don't think they're seeing what we're seeing. What do you think, Kai?
No, they're not.
No, they're not seeing it.
These are the roads you gotta get to. You gotta pass and get to school.
If you need to get to St. John,
got a flat tire. He doesn't even know he got a flat tire.
Yeah, I probably got a flat tire and I don't even know it. If you want to get to St. John, you're gonna have to go through this road. You want to get to the east end, you gotta go take this road. These islands are in trouble.
que ya me está grabando. Y él no sabe que los feos me están buscando. Mira que lo que tú sabes, eso es un gancho. Para mí que él me está persiguiendo, me está buscando. Pero nada, ok, listen to me. Un rescate, aquí no hay nada wannabe. Nadie se murió, todo el mundo aquí está vivo, haciendo cuarto y multiplicando a los amigos. Meterito, un palomito. Tú quieres que es un hombrecito. Y mira dónde tú estás en Santo Domingo, corta atrás de un culito gringo. Un culito gringo, la estoy mangando. Y los cuernos allá le están pegando. Eso no es nada, él no está mangando. Cale está asegurado que tiene un hijo jugando. Pero padre, tú sabes que de la rima. Tengo que cargar mi carro con gasolina. El de Carlos parqueado, ni que callar. A las 10 a beber pa' mi bloque, ratata, ta, 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 ta. Mira que ya va en la cura. Ta, 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 ta. Oye, vamos a vacilar. Ta, 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 ta. Listen to me, wannabe. Van a parar. Ta, 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 ta. La gente de San John, money van a buscar. Ta, ta, ta. Ah, el tipo grabando se está burlando. ¿Cuánto para YouTube? Tú te estás buscando. Mira que los cuartos lo estoy regalando. ¿Un cheque de 3,000? Tú te estás burlando. Mira que lo que tú sabes que yo soy rapero del quiero. Carlos es un bombero. Mira que lo que porque tiene una cuida. Y allá en el trabajo corta con una botella. Ya.
Everywhere you went, you know, you still had people having a good time and trying to stay positive. And I mean, what the hell? They were keeping the commerce going on the islands. So this is pretty much the story all over the island. In fact, this is pretty much this one's better than what you normally see, but the infrastructure everywhere is just completely decimated. And there are people here working on it, getting it fixed. But you think about what's got to happen here to get all of this fixed. You got to have harbor workers, somebody with a truck to haul the stuff off. You have to have you have power lines here, and data lines, and telephone lines, and so there's a lot to it. And this road is in surprisingly good condition. I don't even go anywhere without a Jeep anymore, and sometimes you can't get there with a Jeep in four-wheel drive. So, a lot of people around here are worried that the islanders are worried that we're going to forget them. And it's true. Americans tend to have kind of a short memory when it comes to disaster. And I'm making this as a reminder, let's not forget about the Virgin Islands. These people are going to need our help for a long time. So this is Megan's Bay on St. Thomas. One of the many popular public beaches. And you can see what the storm surge did here. Wind and water in this case. This is hit pretty hard. I mean, there's a tree with the whole root system completely pulled out of the ground. I think it's important to consider just exactly what you're looking at. Yeah, there's somebody's house, missing a roof, totally uninhabitable. Here you see sections of the roof, and here's the other section of the roof across the street. Telephone poles snapped like toothpicks. Pieces of people's houses and lives strewn all over the place. It's hard to take. It's hard to take. That was somebody's beautiful, beautiful home.
They're from the Humane Society, so I'm just transporting them. But that's not gonna. They just name them and then
I
whenever.
mean, I got a couple of, kids stuff on different stuff with Caesar as the name. I thought it was like funny. I thought it was,
I'm sure when they get adopted, their names will change.
Well, you remember that part in the beginning where I was talking about hanging out on a beach and probably wondering what the hell that had to do with any of the rest of this. And the point was, well, 107 degrees at Point Reyes, a place you normally go to freeze your butt off, get hypothermia, and hopefully get some great photos. And it's a beautiful place, but never hot like that. And here we had people in the ocean and swimming and all of that. Well, that kind of heat, no humidity, took all of the moisture, what was left, out of the ground, and this is what we ended up with. Fortunately, we had a lot of volunteers and a lot of people coming together, Red Cross and partners, to help everybody get through this. But we're going to have to take a look at how we live. I can't help but think of what Al Gore was saying about when you get to a certain level of parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. Historically, the temperature follows the CO2 levels, and right now it's higher than it's ever been in thousands of years, ever in recorded history. And, it's kind of indisputable that this kind of stuff is going to keep happening. It's going to get worse. And, it doesn't matter whether you believe that climate change is real or, whether maybe you believe it's real, maybe you think it's, not man-made, we can't do anything about it, it's Mother Nature. Well, that's fine, but you can't deny that we're contributing. And, people need to start doing something about it. These disasters are going to get worse. They're going to continue. And we need people like the Red Cross, organizations that get out there and help people out. And, people that are willing to do something for others without any sort of personal enrichment. You go out and you do it because it's the right thing to do. Saving the planet is the right thing to do as well. And, maybe it's not man-made, but, we all got to try. We all got to try to do our part. This experience has been life-changing for me. I've never done anything like this or seen anything like this. And, I'm tired. It was 14-hour days, 7 days a week for basically 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And, but I've never been happier to have done something, for so little. As I said, it's a life-changing experience. If you have some time, you can donate it to the Red Cross. I highly recommend it. You'll learn a lot about the world and people, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where you're from, what you look like, or what color you are, or what your sexual preference is. Nature certainly doesn't care. So, best we can do is try to help each other out. Anyway, thanks for watching.